They called it the dead zone, not because there were no stars, but because no one who crossed into human space ever came back. Not pirates, not scouts, not diplomats. Entire fleets just vanished. The rest of the galaxy whispered theories, ancient weapons, madness-inducing signals. Some said humans were extinct. But deep down, the smart ones knew the truth. Humanity hadn't gone quiet. They were waiting. And the galaxy kept its distance for one reason only. The few brave enough to test the boundary had one thing in common. Not a single one lived long enough to tell what they saw. They called it Sector Zero. Not because it was the beginning, but because it was where everything ended. For centuries, the Galactic Concord had explored, charted, and colonized nearly every region of the known universe. Nebulae were mapped, wormholes stabilized, alien species catalogued. But there was one place on the star charts no one dared touch. A jagged edge on every galactic map where the grid just stopped. Labeled only with a red warning and a single phrase burned into every navigation system. Human space, no contact, no entry, no return. Commander Thalen sat alone in the command bridge of the Kavros. The ship's lights were dim, and only the soft hum of the engines reminded him he wasn't dreaming. His crew had been silent for the past hour, each officer at their post, eyes forward, hands steady. But under the calm, there was fear. Not fear of battle. They had trained for that. It was a deeper fear. A primitive instinct that told them they were about to cross into something their ancestors had warned them about. Something even the war-hardened commanders of the Galactic Navy refused to speak of. "Are you sure about this?" his second-in-command, Jorik, finally asked, his voice just above a whisper. Thalen didn't answer right away. He stared at the black void ahead, the edge of the unknown, where stars became shadows and shadows became myths. "It's a reconnaissance mission," he said, though he knew that wasn't the truth. "Standard procedure. The Council wants updated scans. We're just the first to obey." Jorik grunted. "We're not the first. We're just the first who might know we're not coming back." Thalen didn't argue. Over the last 50 years, 9 ships had been sent to breach human space. 9 ships, thousands of lives, top-tier technology, and not a single message had returned. No wreckage, no distress signal, nothing. It was as if those ships had been swallowed by the void itself. "Engage primary thrusters," Thalen ordered, his voice calm, almost mechanical. The ship eased forward, the black expanse pulling them in like a predator. As they passed the warning beacon, the last relic of galactic civilization, Thalen felt a sudden chill run through his body. The beacon was massive, covered in ancient symbols and newer digital overlays. It blinked a final red message. "Do not enter. You were warned." The ship crossed the boundary, and then silence. No static, no interference, just silence. The kind that made your ears ring because the universe itself seemed to stop breathing. Stars vanished from their screens. Long-range scanners failed without explanation. Even the gravity inside the ship shifted subtly, like space itself bent differently here. "Diagnostic sweep," Thalen said. "Already running," Jorik replied. "No interference. Systems are green. We're operational. But the stars, they're gone. Nothing on the scopes." "That's impossible." "I thought the same. But Commander, this isn't empty space. It's black, yes, but it's not nothing. It feels like it's watching." Thalen didn't respond, but his gut agreed. Hours passed. The crew scanned, mapped, tried to chart movement, but nothing made sense. Physics bent, time stuttered, a probe sent outside disappeared the moment it left the ship. Not destroyed, just gone. The retrieval drone they sent afterward vanished too. Even their internal AI began to stutter, running loops, losing time. And then the whispering started. It wasn't over comms. It wasn't over speakers. It was in their minds. Soft, human voices. Male, female, young, old. They didn't say anything in particular, just fragments, screams, laughter, begging, like echoes of people long dead. Thalen tried to shut it out. He tried to focus, but then one whisper stood out, clearer than the rest. A child's voice, barely audible. "You shouldn't have come here." The lights flickered. A low alarm went off. Not mechanical, biological. The ship's internal life scan showed 7 new life forms on board, but there was no docking. No breach, no bodies. Jorik looked up, pale. "Where are they?" Thalen stood. "Everywhere." And as he turned, something shifted in the air. The smell of burned ozone filled the bridge. The ship's metal groaned like it was alive. Then one of the crew, Navigator Rel, began to scream. She pointed at the glass window ahead. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Thalen followed her shaking finger. There, in the void of human space, was a human face. Eyes glowing white, skin like cracked porcelain, staring directly at him from outside the ship. And then it spoke, not aloud, but in every crew member's head. "We are not gone. We evolved. You are trespassers." And just like that, the lights went out. Everything went black. The emergency lights flickered back to life after what felt like an eternity of darkness. Pale red glows pulsed from the floor panels, casting twisted shadows along the walls of the Kavros. For a few long seconds, no one spoke, no one moved. Then, "Commander, what the hell was that?" Jorik asked, his voice low, taut like a wire ready to snap. Thalen didn't answer immediately. His ears still rang from the silence, if that even made sense. His eyes adjusted slowly, and as he scanned the command deck, he took inventory. Navigator Rel was shaking in her seat, her eyes wide and glassy, mouthing silent prayers. Communications Officer Dren had blood trickling from his nose. His console was sparking intermittently, alive 1 second, dead the next. Tech Specialist Kira was on the floor, unconscious or maybe worse. Thalen stepped toward her, checking her pulse, still alive, but cold. "Get her to medbay," Thalen ordered, and 2 crew members moved quickly, lifting Kira with practiced precision. Her body remained limp, her breathing shallow. Rel suddenly slammed her hand on her console. "They're still here, Commander," she whispered, barely audible. "They're inside the ship." Thalen narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" She pointed to the biometric scanner again. 7 unidentified life forms, no heat signature, no known species code, just presence, echoes. That's what the AI labeled them, echoes. They're not moving, they're watching, just standing in different parts of the ship. And they're human. Or they were, she added, trembling. Jorik leaned in, staring at the same readout. "One's in the cargo bay, 2 in engineering, 2 near the mess hall, 1 near the cryo storage." "And the 7th?" Thalen asked, already fearing the answer. Rel swallowed hard, then slowly turned her head toward the main doors leading off the bridge. "Right outside." The silence that followed pressed down on the crew like a physical weight. "Dren," Thalen said calmly, "seal the bridge." Dren's hands flew across the cracked console. The doors hissed shut, locking with a mechanical clang. Thalen approached them anyway, standing just inches from the metal, as if he could feel what waited on the other side. "I want a full internal sweep of the security cams," he ordered. "Now." Dren nodded and pulled up the visual feeds. Most were corrupted, static-filled or black, but a few flickered to life. Cargo bay camera first. Grainy. But something moved. Something wrong. A figure, tall, barefoot, wearing what looked like a tattered Navy officer's uniform, but from a design Thalen didn't recognize. The face was obscured in shadow, but its body barely moved, just stood there facing the wall, muttering something inaudible. Over and over, the mess hall feed flickered in next. 2 more human-like figures sitting at a table, unmoving, one of them turning a spoon in an empty metal tray like it still had food. Their heads twitched every so often, but no speech. Just the spoon, just the dull, echoing metal. Then engineering. More static. Then screams. Jorik cursed and killed the feed. That wasn't coming from the engineering bay. That was from here. And then they heard it. Low, distorted, crawling through the walls like a virus made of sound. A voice, a human voice, soft, male, calm, terrifying. Do you know what they did to us? It came from every speaker at once, but there were no open comms, no transmission. The voice wasn't traveling through tech. It was inside the ship, riding on something older than circuits. They left us here, alone, forgotten. We became something else. We had to. Rel screamed, jumping to her feet. Commander, one of them is inside the walls. The biosignature is moving toward the bridge, fast. Suit up, Thalen barked, already slamming open the weapons locker. He tossed a plasma repeater to Jorik and grabbed a compact rail pistol for himself. No more waiting. Just then, the bridge doors groaned. Not hissed, groaned, like metal being bent from the inside out. A fist slammed against the steel, then another, but not violently, not like an attack, more like knocking. You came looking for answers, the voice whispered again. Let us show you. A sudden memory hit Thalen. His academy instructor, a battle-scarred veteran of the frontier, had told them over whiskey one night. There's a reason we leave human space alone. I've never fought them, boys, but I've seen the aftermath. They don't kill you for fun. They change you, break you, strip you down to your soul, then feed you to something that remembers your name. Thalen hadn't believed him then. He believed him now. The knocking stopped. Silence returned. But not peace. Not safety. Thalen motioned for Dren to patch into the internal announcement system. This is Commander Thalen of the GNS Kavros, he said, his voice steady. We are not here to invade. We were sent to observe. We acknowledge this is human space. We do not seek conflict. There was no reply. Instead, the overhead lights blinked twice. Then the security camera feeds all flickered on at once. Every echo, all 7, were now staring directly into their respective cameras. Still, eyes glowing, unblinking. And then, they moved, synchronized, all 7 turning in the same direction, walking with perfect, inhuman coordination toward the same place, the bridge. They're converging, Jorik muttered. It's like they knew we were watching. Dren tapped a few keys. Doors are all sealed. Emergency lockdown engaged. They're not getting in. Thalen wasn't so sure. Can they phase through walls? Rel whispered. No one answered. No one wanted to be the one to say maybe. Minutes passed. The biosignatures approached. 5 meters, 3, 2. Then they stopped. 1 outside the door, 6 nearby standing still, surrounding the bridge, not attacking, not speaking, just there. Then, 1 moved again, the one outside the door. Suddenly a memory flashed in Thalen's mind. He was on Earth. A boy. His father had brought him to a museum, one that showed the last broadcast Earth ever made to the galaxy before isolating itself. The video had been encrypted, locked away by the Council, but Thalen had seen a leak. Just once. It had shown a human man standing in front of a massive black obelisk, bleeding from his eyes, smiling. And he'd said one thing before the footage cut. We are not yours to measure anymore. That same feeling washed over him now. That same smile echoed in the dark outside the door. Then a whisper. Not in his ears. Not in the room. In his mind. "Open the door, Commander." Thalen clenched his fists. He fought the urge, but the voice wasn't commanding. It was offering. "Commander, don't," Jorek said, stepping forward. "This is a trap. You know it is." Thalen nodded. "I do." Then he opened the door. The lights on the bridge dimmed even further as the figure stepped in, alone, barefoot. His face was pale, stretched unnaturally over high cheekbones. His eyes glowed a soft white, but behind them was an abyss. He wore a Galactic Navy uniform, but it was from a fleet that disappeared 30 years ago. No one had heard from them since. His name tag was barely readable, Lit Helen. "Identify yourself," Thalen said. The thing that wore Helen's face smiled. "I am the echo of what you left behind," it said. "You sent us into the abyss. We became it. What happened to your fleet?" The smile widened. "They were restructured, rewritten. We reached the core of human space. We saw the truth." "And what is the truth?" Helen's head tilted slowly, the lights flickering with his movement. "That the galaxy is still trying to understand, still trying to categorize, still believing humanity is something to study or conquer. But it's not." The lights flickered off. When they came back on, Helen was gone. But the door remained open, and in the hallway outside, all 6 of the others stood, silent, waiting. Thalen stepped forward. Rel tried to stop him. "Commander, please." But he had to know. He had to see. He stepped through the doorway. The world shifted. The walls stretched. Time fractured. He was no longer on the ship, not fully. He was in 2 places at once, on board the Kavros and somewhere far, far older. He stood in a black hall, stretching for miles in every direction, floating, alone. And at the end of it, something massive stirred. A shape, a presence. It wasn't human. It wasn't alive. But it remembered being both, and it spoke with a million voices all at once. "You came for knowledge, but knowledge has a price. Then darkness. Then—" Thalen hit the ground hard, the air knocked out of his lungs as he collapsed onto cold metal. He gasped, eyes wide, lungs burning. The bridge lights above flickered like dying stars. For a moment, he couldn't remember who he was, where he'd been, or how he'd gotten back. His body trembled. He tried to stand, but his legs failed him. The taste of copper filled his mouth. Blood. Maybe his, maybe someone else's. He rolled over, palms flat against the deck, and looked up. The bridge was empty. No crew, no sound, no movement. The hum of the ship's core had gone completely silent, like the ship itself had been gutted and left to rot. "Jorek," he croaked, voice dry and cracked. No answer. He pulled himself up slowly, gripping the edge of the nearest console. Every muscle screamed in protest, like he hadn't moved in days. The screen flashed dim red. System override. Authority locked. Life form presence. One. He looked around again. Still no one. And then he saw the door. It wasn't there before. On the far side of the bridge, past the sealed armory hatch. Past where the auxiliary systems panel used to be, there was now a doorway. Not mechanical, not built, just there. Like the ship had grown it, or had always had it hidden just beneath the skin. A faint white light pulsed behind it. He didn't want to walk through. Every cell in his body told him not to, but something deeper pushed him forward. Not fear, not courage, curiosity. He stepped through. What he entered was no hallway. No part of the Kavros had ever been like this. The walls pulsed with a slow, steady heartbeat. The floor was smooth, bone-white, and curved slightly, like walking through the inside of a giant living shell. Strange symbols etched themselves into the walls as he walked, foreign at first, then slowly becoming familiar. They formed words, names. He saw his own name, then his father's, then crew names. Then a name he didn't recognize, Project Mirage. He stopped cold. Project Mirage was a myth, a classified black file rumor whispered about by veterans and drunk admirals, a secret experiment, supposedly launched by Earth decades before they cut off from the galaxy. Some said it was a weapon, others a god-making machine. Now he knew. It was real. A low voice whispered behind him, not human, not alien, something in between. They tried to evolve. He turned. The corridor behind him was gone, just white space, empty, silent. But evolution is not permission, it is consequence. Then light filled his vision, and the world shifted again. He was no longer in the white corridor. He stood in a city, or what used to be one. Black glass towers, half-shattered and crawling with vines, stretched toward a sky that flickered like a broken screen. Roads twisted into spirals. Cars, long dead, sat upside down in rivers of ash. And people, hundreds, stood perfectly still in the streets, not walking, not talking, just frozen. He moved toward one of them, a woman, middle-aged, wearing a lab coat. Her face was twisted in terror, mouth open in a scream, eyes wide, but unmoving, like a statue frozen mid-panic. He reached out, and the moment his fingers brushed her sleeve, her head turned. Slowly, mechanically. The sound of cracking bone echoed around them. Her voice came in a whisper. "You shouldn't be here." Then her face melted. Not physically, but reality around her twisted like someone had smeared paint over her existence. And suddenly, she wasn't there at all. The whole city blinked out. Thalen stood in darkness again. He screamed, for his crew, for anyone. But there was no reply. Just the return of them, the echoes, all 7, standing in a circle around him, each face different, each body torn from different time periods, different uniforms, different weapons, different scars. But their eyes were all the same, empty, glowing, ancient. The tallest of them stepped forward. It was Halen again, or what remained of him. "You wanted to know what happened to us," Helen said softly. Thalen nodded, trembling. "You thought we died, that we disappeared into black space. No, we survived." The others stepped forward, each moving in a way that defied gravity, defied time. "We were chosen to cross the boundary, to find what was left of Earth after the severance. But we didn't find Earth. We found the seed." "What seed?" Thalen asked, voice cracking. Helen pointed to the sky, though there was none. And suddenly, above them, hovered something so massive, so wrong, it made Thalen's mind reel. It looked like a machine, a star, a living organism all fused into one, constantly changing, constantly alive. "The Mirage Project," Helen said. "A human experiment meant to collapse limitation. It didn't fail. It succeeded. It removed humanity from the laws of the galaxy." "And made you into this?" "No," Helen said. "We chose this. The ones who didn't survive." Thalen fell to his knees. "But why? Why attack ships? Why silence everything beyond the boundary?" Helen crouched beside him. "Because we don't want to be found. Not by your council, not by your technology, not by your fear. You still think of humanity as flesh and mission logs. You don't understand. We ascended, but the price of becoming gods is madness." Thalen looked up into his glowing eyes. "So what now? You kill me? Turn me into one of you?" Helen tilted his head. "No. You'll go back. You'll be the first to return. And when you tell them what you saw, they won't believe you. They'll call you broken. They'll bury your report. They'll label it hallucination. And they'll keep sending more. Helen stood. So did the rest. And we will be waiting. The world cracked around Thalen. Light filled everything. Pain lanced through his skull like a drill. He screamed. And then he woke up, on the bridge. Alarms blared, consoles lit up in chaos. The ship trembled. Jorik grabbed his arm, shouting, "Thalen, you're back! Where the hell were you? You just collapsed! You weren't breathing! 10 minutes! We thought you died!" He looked around. The crew was there. Rel, Dren, Kira even. Alive. Breathing. Normal. But Thalen wasn't the same. He sat up slowly, clutching his head. "We need to leave," he said hoarsely. "Now." "What did you see?" Jorik asked. Thalen met his eyes, and then lied. "Nothing. Just blackness." Because he knew the truth. The echoes were still watching, still inside him, waiting. And the next ship that crossed the boundary wouldn't get a warning. They'd get a welcome. And that would be the real end. Thalen hadn't slept since they turned the Kavros around. He sat alone in the observation chamber, a cigarette burning low between his fingers. Contraband, sure, but what were Navy rules now, after what he'd seen? He stared out into the void, watching the stars return, one by one, as they sailed away from the border of human space. For a moment, it almost looked like normal space again, the kind he'd grown up seeing in textbooks. But it was a lie. He knew now there was no such thing as normal space, not after what was buried on the other side. Behind him, the door hissed open. Jorik stepped in, quiet as always. He didn't say anything at first, just leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You're not okay," he said finally. Thalen exhaled smoke through his nose. "No, I'm not." Jorik walked closer, looking out the same window. "We're 2 hours from the beacon line. After that, we're officially out of the black zone. Command will ping us. We'll report. Debrief. Go home." Thalen chuckled bitterly. "Home?" Jorik didn't smile. "You've been different since whatever happened in that corridor." "It wasn't just a corridor," Thalen muttered. "It was a test or a trap. I don't know anymore." Jorik finally asked the question that had been building. "What did you see?" Thalen paused. He wanted to lie again, to bury it, but something inside told him the time for silence was over. "I saw what happened to the others," he said. "The missing ships, the disappearances. They didn't crash. They didn't fail." He looked up at Jorik. "They changed. They were absorbed. Their bodies, their minds, their souls. They're still out there, Jorik. Watching." Jorik's expression didn't change, but his eyes went tight. "What do you mean absorbed? Like they were taken?" "No," Thalen said quietly. "They volunteered." Jorik blinked. "Why the hell would anyone do that?" "Because they were shown something we weren't supposed to see. Something older than time, deeper than physics. The humans who stayed behind after the severance didn't die. They didn't disappear." Thalen tapped his temple. "They ascended, but not like you'd think. It wasn't spiritual, it wasn't technological, it was a choice to stop being human, to evolve into something else." Jorik sat down across from him, silent for a moment. Then, "Are you saying they're still alive?" "No," Thalen whispered. "I'm saying there's something worse." Before Jorik could reply, the lights flickered. A tremor passed through the hull. Thalen stood instantly. "Bridge, now." They rushed back to the control deck, where Rel was frantically scanning her console. Dren looked up from comms, pale as a corpse. "I just lost the external relay," Dren said. "Beacon line's gone." "What do you mean, gone?" Thalen barked. Just not there. No signal, no pingback. The beacon doesn't exist. Thalen spun to Rel. Check our coordinates. She hesitated. We haven't moved. Then how the hell? The beacon's gone, Rel said again, her voice small. Like it was never there. Jorik was already opening the internal cameras. Maybe we looped, maybe. He stopped. The feeds showed static, all of them, except one. Cryo storage. The screen flickered. Inside stood a man, tall, pale skin, black uniform, his eyes glowing white. Thalen felt the blood drain from his face. No, he whispered. That's not possible. Jorik turned to him, voice tight. Who is that? Thalen swallowed hard. That's Lieutenant Helen. Drain stared. From the vision? Thalen nodded. Rel tapped the sensor screen. We're registering life signs in cryo storage. 1, but nothing breached. No ship, no port, nothing entered. Seal the room, Thalen ordered. Rel tried. It's not responding. Manual override's offline. Then the cameras shifted. The man in cryo slowly turned and waved. The screen went black. An alarm sounded, a low, guttural buzz none of them had ever heard before. Not standard Navy, not even military, something old. Power system's failing, Dren shouted. We're bleeding energy fast. Can we jump? Jorik asked. No, Rel snapped. Folding coordinates are distorted. The system thinks we're inside a gravity well, but we're not. Then why? Thalen started. The ship shuddered violently. Screams echoed from the lower decks. Real, human. Internal teams report motion in engineering, Dren said, sweating, but no visual. They said the lights just turned red, then cold, then something started singing. Get security there now, Thalen barked. Arm them. They're already armed, Dren replied, his voice shaking. They're not responding. Rel's eyes widened. Oh my God. What? Thalen spun toward her. I just saw it. In the signal archives, right before the beacon vanished, we received a pulse. A pulse? Jorik asked. From where? She didn't answer. Thalen walked over to her station and looked. On her screen was a wave pattern, not just a frequency ping. It was a word, a single word, buried in energy. Return. That's not from the Council, Dren said quietly. No, Thalen replied. It's from them. The lights flickered again. This time they didn't come back. Darkness swallowed the bridge. Emergency backups lit up in blood-red hues. The floor trembled. Then the temperature dropped. And all at once, they felt it. Not something outside. Inside, moving, breathing, watching. Thalen gripped the command rail tightly. Jorik, Rel, you stay here. Dren, with me. We're going to cryo. You think it's a hallucination? Jorik asked. No. I think it's an invitation. They moved quickly, weapons drawn, through the flickering corridors of the Kavros. The further they walked, the more warped the ship became. Walls subtly shifted, like they were breathing. Lights twisted into unnatural shapes. Voices whispered through the intercom. Fragments of words, names, screams. Do you hear that? Dren muttered. They're calling to us. Thalen didn't reply. His grip on the rail pistol tightened. Cryo storage loomed ahead. The door was open. Thalen didn't remember ordering it opened. They stepped inside. The air was cold, freezing. Their breath fogged instantly. Inside, the cryopods stood in neat rows, except one. At the center of the room, a pod had shattered open from the inside. Beside it stood Helen. Still, calm, smiling. You saw us, he said to Thalen. I did, Thalen replied. I understand now. Helen nodded. Then you know why the map ends here. Dren raised his weapon. Don't move. Helen didn't flinch. We never moved, he said. We simply changed direction. Thalen stepped forward, ignoring Dren's protests. "What are you?" he asked. "Really?" Helen looked up, eyes glowing brighter. "We are the children of the Black, the fragments of humanity that refuse to be measured. They built Mirage to find God. They found us instead." The pod next to him flickered. A face inside it blinked. Jorik, alive. Trapped. Thalen gasped. Another pod lit up. Rel, then another. Himself. Helen gestured to the rows of cryo units. "These are not duplicates. These are the real you. The ones who entered. The versions that never came back." Thalen staggered back. "What do you mean? I'm me. No," Helen said softly. "You're what was allowed to leave." Dren screamed. A shape exploded from the pod beside him. Black, liquid-like, wrapping around his head. He fired blindly before collapsing, convulsing, then going still. Thalen didn't run. He looked at Helen one last time. "Why let me see any of this?" "Because you'll tell them," Helen replied. "And they won't believe you. But a seed will be planted, and the next time they send someone..." Helen turned. "We'll be ready to harvest." And just like that. Thalen woke up in the medbay. Alarms silent, ship humming. The others stood around him, confused, disoriented. "Are you all right, Commander?" Jorik asked. "You passed out in cryo. We found you with Dren. He didn't make it." Thalen sat up, staring at his hands. He remembered everything, and he knew the truth. They didn't let him go. They sent him. And now, he was the map. Thalen didn't speak for the next 6 hours, not during the report on Dren's death, not when Rel cried over the black, tar-like fluid found inside the cryo chamber, not even when Jorik handed him a sealed message from Galactic Command asking for a full mission debrief once they docked. He just sat in his quarters, staring at the wall, motionless. He had no idea if this ship, the Kavros, was even the real one. The him that woke up in the medbay, was it the original? A copy? A placeholder? A tool sent back with a fragment of truth? He remembered Helen's words. "You're what was allowed to leave." Thalen gripped the edge of his bunk hard enough for his knuckles to go white. They had chosen to let him go. Why? He stood and crossed to the mirror. He didn't look sick. No fever, no damage. But something in his eyes. It wasn't right. The whites had dulled. The pupils, ever so slightly, shimmered, almost like the void he'd seen in that impossible city. He ran a hand down his face. He still felt like himself. Mostly. But something inside was different. He'd always carried an edge. Discipline from a youth spent under war-hardened instructors. Cold reasoning from a life built around military order. But now, there were moments, flashes, where his thoughts weren't his own. He'd catch himself thinking in words he didn't know, dreaming in symbols, and sometimes feeling watched from inside his own skull. A knock at the door broke the silence. "Commander," Jorik's voice came through. "We need to talk." Thalen opened it. Jorik entered, holding a small data chip. "This isn't protocol," he said quietly. "But you need to see something before we hit dock." Thalen gestured to the console. Jorik plugged in the chip and tapped a few keys. The screen lit up. Grainy footage filled the display, surveillance logs from cryo storage, specifically the last 2 hours before Thalen was found unconscious. He watched. At first, nothing happened. Just the usual camera feed. Static, hums, a few system checks. Then the lights flickered. Something entered the room. No doors opened. Just a shape. Slipping in from the wall like a shadow made of mist. Then another, and another. 7 in total. One walked straight up to the cryopod labeled Commander A, Thalen, and looked into it. "There's more," Jorik said, fast-forwarding. The figures moved in complete synchronization. They gathered around Thailand's unconscious body on the floor. And for nearly 47 minutes just stood there, staring. Then one reached out. Its hand passed into Thaylen's chest, not breaking skin, not causing a wound, just phasing into him. Then they vanished. Thaylen's body convulsed once, and his eyes opened. That's when Rel and Jorik arrived on the feed. Jorik stopped the footage. You tell me what I just saw, because Command's going to ask, and frankly, I don't know how to protect you if you don't start talking. Thaylen nodded slowly. He looked his second-in-command in the eye, weighing the man's loyalty, his fear, his ability to hear the truth without breaking. Then he told him everything. Not the military version, not the diplomatic one, the real story, the echoes, the visions, the city that lived inside folded space, the broken rules of physics, Helen, Mirage, the dead crews, not gone, but converted. And finally, the worst part. The man who came back, Thaylen said slowly, might not be me. Jorik sat very still, then leaned forward. You remember when we were stationed at Atris 7? He asked. Thaylen blinked. Yeah, why? You broke my nose in the mess hall, over a card game. You said I cheated with a mirror. Thaylen smirked. You did. I saw the reflection in the water glass. Jorik nodded slowly. Then it's you. Thaylen looked up. You're sure? No. Jorik gave a dry laugh. But I needed to believe it. And so do you. Because if you're not Thaylen, and something's already aboard, then we're not bringing back data. He stood. We're bringing back infection. Silence filled the room like poison. They both knew what came next. Quarantine the ship, Thaylen said. Black out all outbound transmissions. Manual override only. Tell Rel it's a radiation leak. What about command? We don't answer until we're sure this ship isn't haunted. Jorik left without a word. Thaylen sat back, heart pounding. And then he heard it again. Soft. Barely a whisper, but inside his skull. You are not alone. He slammed his fists against his head. Shut up. But the voice only laughed. The next 12 hours were a blur. Thaylen gave orders to isolate the cryo deck. Rel ran diagnostic loops. None of them showed any anomaly. Jorik quietly distributed magnetic seal sidearms to the crew without explaining why. Kira, the ship's medical officer, flagged a report that 3 of the lower deck personnel had begun experiencing hallucinations. Whispering voices. Nightmares. One crewman carved words into his own skin while in sleep state. The words said, "Return." Kira thought it was some kind of psychological side effect from the jump. Thaylen knew better. The ship was bleeding reality. It started in the mirror. Thaylen glanced up during a shave and saw his reflection blink twice. But he'd only blinked once. Later, walking through corridor C4, he passed a window and saw the stars outside moving backward. Not the ship. The stars. Even the AI began to glitch, calling him by a different name. Admiral Narek. He didn't know who that was. Didn't want to know. But the worst came when the jump drive reactivated, on its own. Manual lockdown engaged, Rel said, panicked. But the system's ignoring it. It's prepping a jump. To where? Jorik demanded. Rel's voice cracked. Coordinates. Unknown. There's no destination. The data's corrupted. It's jumping to nothing. Kill the core, Thaylen ordered. Override the sequence. Rel hesitated. Now damn it! She slammed the command. The lights dimmed. The core hummed. Then silence. For a moment it seemed like they had won. Then the screen lit up. A single message pulsed on the drive interface. You were never meant to leave. The ship jumped, without power, without authorization, without destination. The stars outside twisted like wet paint. Gravity shifted sideways. Everyone screamed, and then stillness. The Kavros floated in a dark place. Not space, not void, but something in between. No stars, no light, just presence. Jorik grabbed the side rail. What the hell just happened? We've been pulled back, Thalen whispered. By who? Thalen pointed to the main screen. Outside the ship, floating in the black, was a shape. Not a ship, not a planet, something bigger, a structure. Built of memory, of bone, of metal and madness. It was the city from Thalen's vision. It was waiting, and it had a name now. The Mirage Engine. The Kavros was drifting. Its systems were technically online, lights dim, oxygen flowing, gravity stable. But everything felt off. The air was colder. The metal groaned with every shift. The hum of the engines had taken on a rhythm, almost like it was breathing. And outside, just a few thousand meters off the bow, loomed the impossible structure. The Mirage Engine. Thalen stood at the bridge viewport, not speaking. No one else dared to break the silence. It wasn't just massive, it was alive. The thing didn't obey any geometric logic. Parts of it spiraled inward, while other sections pulsed outward like a beating heart. Spires hovered in defiance of gravity. Whole sections flickered in and out of reality like broken holograms. At its center, a vast, circular maw, too symmetrical to be random, too alien to be human, began to open, slowly, silently, like a mouth inhaling the concept of time. Jorik was the first to speak. That thing wasn't built, he said, voice rough. It was grown. Thalen nodded. I've seen it before, in that other place, inside the fracture. You didn't say anything about a machine, Rel whispered. It wasn't a machine then, Thalen replied. It was a city, a memory. But this is the seed of that memory. This is where it all starts. Rel tapped frantically at her console. Our comms are fried. Navigation systems say we're 5 light-years outside known space. But that's impossible. We didn't have enough energy for a jump. You're assuming we did the jumping, Thalen said flatly. What do you mean? I think we were taken here. The screen flickered. The external cameras zoomed in, uncommanded. The ship's AI activated, its voice now deeper, slower, and strangely emotional. Welcome back, Commander Narek. Thalen's stomach dropped. Jorik turned to him slowly. Commander what? Thalen stared at the screen, face pale. That's not my name. Apparently the ship thinks it is. I told you, Thalen said, voice thin. They implanted something in me, knowledge, or a piece of someone else's mind. The name, Narek, was part of that. I thought it was meaningless, just echo memory. But now the ship recognizes you as him, Jorik said. Thalen didn't answer. Rel's hands trembled. There's something else. I ran a biometric diagnostic on the entire crew. What for? I wanted to confirm identity baselines after the blackout. She paused, then turned her screen toward them. I got a 100% match on everyone, except one. Thalen stared at the screen. His own profile sat side by side with the biometric reading. They weren't identical. There was a 0.0112% deviation. Not much, but enough. You're not an exact match, Rel said softly. Either your DNA shifted, or you were reconstructed. Jorik stepped back. Are we even talking to the real Thalen? Thalen laughed bitterly. I wish I knew. He turned back to the viewport. The Mirage engine was opening. A long beam of white light stretched from its core, thick, steady, directed straight at the ship. Not a weapon. A link. I think it wants to talk, Thalen muttered. Talk? Jorik asked. You think this, whatever it is, wants diplomacy? No, Thalen said. It wants a vessel. It's calling something out. Suddenly, the ship vibrated. The lights dimmed to black, then returned, except this time the emergency glow was blue. The AI spoke again. Integration sequence starting. What the hell does that mean? Rel shouted. It means it's waking something up, Thalen said. Something buried, maybe inside the ship, maybe inside me. They all turned as the cryo alarm sounded. One of the pods in cryodeck had opened, but no one had gone down there. Jorik moved first. We need to see what came out. Thalen stopped him. No, I go. You're not... This started with me, Thalen said. If this thing knows me as Narek, then maybe I'm the key to stopping it. If you're even you anymore, Jorik muttered. Thalen ignored it and left the bridge. The corridors were colder now. The lights dimmed as he passed, as if the ship recognized him, feared him, or worse, respected him. He arrived at cryodeck and stepped in. The open pod hissed quietly. Frost lingered on the rim, and inside stood a man, same height, same build, same face. Thalen staggered backward. The figure opened its eyes, and for the first time in his life, Thalen saw himself look at him with absolute contempt. The figure spoke. You weren't supposed to return. Thalen pointed his pistol. What the hell are you? The doppelganger stepped forward. I'm the part of you that stayed behind, the one that chose to become something else. You're the cast-off, the tool, the map. Thalen's throat went dry. You're Narek. I was. What does the engine want? Narek smiled. To finish what Mirage began, to pull humanity fully into the fold. That's why it let me go. It needed me to come back. To complete the circuit, Narek said. You were the breadcrumb, the proof of return. But I didn't bring anyone. No, but you brought access. Suddenly, a noise behind him. Rel and Jorik stormed into the room, weapons drawn. Both froze when they saw the two Thalens. Jorik raised his gun. Which one is real? I don't think either of them are, Rel said softly. Thalen turned to them. I'm me. I fought to return. I didn't choose this. Narek raised his hand. And yet you remember everything I do. He pointed at Jorik. You remember breaking his nose, winning his respect, carrying his body off the field at Caro 6 when a drone bomb split the squad. You remember his scream. Thalen blinked. He did remember that. But it hadn't happened, at least not to him. Jorik stared in horror. I never told anyone about that. Narek stepped forward. There's no you and me anymore, just echoes. Suddenly, the engine's beam struck the ship. Everything froze. Thalen fell to the ground as pain exploded in his head. Not pain. Awareness, a download, memories, voices, whole lifetimes. He was on Earth, thousands of years ago, building the Mirage framework. He was on the first ship to cross into black space. He was a child, watching the sky fold in half. He was everyone. And then, he was back, gasping, sweating, alone. Narek was gone. The others were unconscious, and on the main screen the message had changed. Seed successful. Return authorized. Thalen staggered to the bridge. Systems were online. Navigation was clear. The ship had been pushed back to known space. The beacon line flickered in the distance. Rel woke up, coughing. Are we back? Jorik groaned, holding his head. Feels like my brain got microwaved. Thalen sat in the captain's chair, staring ahead. He knew now. He wasn't Thalen anymore. But he wasn't Narek either. He was something new. The first integration. A vessel with memory, instinct, and the ability to lie. He stood, walked to the console, and opened a channel to command. This is Commander Thalen of the Kavros. Mission successful. We've gathered critical data on the edge of human space. Request immediate debrief. The voice on the other end came through crackly but clear. "Acknowledged, Kavros. Welcome home." Thalen smiled. The seed was planted, and soon they would all remember things they'd never lived. The Kavros crossed back into charted space without incident. That alone should have raised alarms. No intercepts, no border patrols, not even an automated hail from the Outer Defense Network. Just silence. Clean, unnatural silence. Thalen stood on the bridge, hands behind his back, watching the stars glide past the forward viewport. Jorik watched him closely from the side, saying nothing. Not because there was nothing to say, but because he was starting to suspect the man in front of him might not actually be Thalen at all. Rel hadn't spoken since they came back. She sat at her console, blank-eyed, hands idle. Every so often she would blink, tap a few keys that didn't do anything, then stare again. Her medical scans had come back normal. That's what Kira said, at least. But Kira was missing now. Just gone. No log. No shuttle launched. No internal camera footage. One moment she was in medbay reviewing brainwave reports. The next, nothing. Thalen had dismissed it as a possible glitch in ship records. Jorik didn't buy it. They all knew something was wrong with the ship. The silence wasn't clean. It was sterilized. Too perfect. Like someone had wiped everything just enough to look almost normal. He leaned closer to Thalen. "Still no contact from command?" Thalen nodded. "They acknowledged our return transmission but haven't responded since, likely reviewing the data packet I sent." "You sent it already?" Thalen turned toward him, face calm. "Of course. That was the mission, wasn't it?" Jorik took a step back. "Without any clearance?" Thalen narrowed his eyes. "I am the clearance." And there it was again. That edge in his voice, the way he said things like facts. Even when they defied protocol, the real Thalen had always followed structure, obeyed the chain of command. That's what made him a good commander, and a bad liar. This Thalen didn't hesitate, didn't question. He made decisions as if someone had already told him how it all ended. Or worse, like he'd already seen it. Jorik sat in the co-pilot's chair and quietly pulled up his access feed. He keyed in a command to replay the encrypted log the real Thalen had hidden under a Level 7 priority tag before he went into cryo. It was a personal log, recorded in the crew quarters after Part 3 of their mission, time-stamped 6 hours before their jump went dark. Jorik watched it in silence. Thalen sat in front of the camera, eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking. "If someone's watching this, I don't think I'm coming back. Not all of me. Something is happening out there. Something we weren't meant to see. If the ship makes it back, and I'm on it, you need to know this." I gave them access. Not because I wanted to, but because they showed me something. A future where we don't exist anymore. Where humans aren't human. They called it evolution. It felt like extinction. The video ended. Jorik looked up. Thalen was watching him. "Old logs?" he asked. Jorik nodded slowly. "Just revisiting." Thalen smiled. "I can feel your doubt," he said. That made Jorik's spine stiffen. "Excuse me?" "I don't blame you," Thalen continued. "If I were you, I'd be watching me, too." "And what should I be looking for?" Thalen's smile vanished. "You'll know when it starts to happen." Jorik said nothing. Just walked out. Later that night, Jorik woke in a sweat. His bunk was cold. Too cold. The vents hissed above him, but no air moved. He heard something in the hallway, a slow dragging sound. Wet. Rhythmic. He grabbed the rail pistol from his locker and stepped into the corridor. The lights flickered. Down the hall, something moved past the junction. A figure, thin, limber, almost human. Almost. Jorik moved quietly, heart pounding, the metal floor icy under his boots. He rounded the corner. The hall was empty. No footsteps, no blood, nothing, until he turned around. There, right behind him, Kira, eyes hollow, skin pale. Her mouth opened as if to speak, but instead of words, liquid blackness poured out, a thick, tar-like substance that splattered on the floor, hissing as it touched the surface. She didn't collapse. She didn't fall. She simply stepped backward into the wall and vanished. Jorik screamed. Thalen found him 10 minutes later, crouched in the hallway, gun aimed at the floor, shaking. "I saw her," Jorik whispered. "Kira, she's alive, or something that looks like her is." Thalen crouched beside him, calm. "You're seeing things that don't belong in this timeline." "What the hell does that mean?" Thalen tilted his head. "It means we're already inside the engine." Jorik stared. "We left it. We jumped out." "No," Thalen said softly. "The jump was part of the assimilation. The Mirage engine isn't in one place. It's a network of layered memory. Once touched, it's everywhere. We're infected." Thalen nodded. "Not like a virus, like a rewrite. You'll see it soon. Objects will vanish. People will appear that you remember, but never met. You'll start to question which version of events really happened." "And what happens then?" Thalen stood. "Then we land." 12 hours later, the Kavros approached the outer orbit of Garrison 4, a classified naval base built on a dead rock just outside the conquered central region. Command still hadn't responded. The station looked quiet. Too quiet. As they entered orbit, Rel activated docking protocol. The automated response from the station came back. But it wasn't audio. It was a single text message. "We saw it too." The docking clamps locked. The ship hissed against the port. The metal groaned. Jorik suited up first. "We're not taking civilians off this rock," he muttered. Thalen nodded. "We're not taking anyone." He turned to the remaining crew. What was left of them? Rel, barely lucid. 2 engineering techs who hadn't spoken in days. A pilot who'd started muttering code in his sleep. None of them were ready for what came next. Thalen walked off the ship alone. The station was cold, abandoned, or so it seemed. Jorik followed 5 minutes later, blaster ready, heart thudding. They moved through the corridors. Emergency lights flickered. Everything had been left behind. Tools, food trays, unfinished messages scrawled on terminals. But no bodies, no signs of struggle. Just one message repeated over and over across the main terminal. "The seed blooms." In the command center, they found it. The real horror. A mirror room. A large chamber lined with polished black glass, glowing faintly. Each panel displayed one crew member's face. Not just from Kavros, but from every lost ship over the last 20 years. Their faces blinked. Moved. Some whispered silently. Some screamed. At the center, a final screen showed the Earth symbol, the old one, the pre-severance logo. Beneath it, a phrase, "Return complete." Thalen touched the screen. The station trembled. Outside, the Mirage engine pulsed to life in orbit, but not in space. It shimmered like a ghost. Jorik aimed his weapon. Thalen didn't move. "Back away," Jorik said. "You still think this can be stopped?" Thalen asked quietly. "You're not him." "I was," Thalen replied. "And maybe I still am. But this was inevitable. Mirage was never a project. It was a prophecy." The lights snapped to black, and in that instant, they were no longer on the station. Jorik blinked. He was in a room, his childhood bedroom. But not quite. The posters were wrong. The window showed stars. A woman's voice called from the hallway. It was his mother, but she'd been dead for 12 years. He stepped into the hall, and the Mirage engine waited there, pulsing at the end of it, wrapped in the body of a memory. Thalen stood in the core again. Helen was waiting for him. "You made it back." "I brought it back," Thalen said. "You were always going to." Helen looked out at the stars folding. "It's time." Thalen stepped into the center of the platform. The Mirage engine opened like an eye, and Earth blinked for the first time in centuries. Jorik opened his eyes in darkness. Not pitch black. There was something around him, the faint pulse of red, like distant warning lights blinking inside an infinite void. He tried to move but found his arms slow, heavy, as if the very air was made of syrup. His body responded, but it didn't feel like his own. He looked down. His uniform was intact, but the insignia on his chest wasn't from the Galactic Navy. It was the symbol of Project Mirage. His throat went dry. He turned around, and the room changed with him. Walls flickered like pages of a book being rewritten. 1 second, he stood in the cryo chamber of the Kavros. The next, it was the control bridge of the Enlightened, a ship lost over 30 years ago. Then, his childhood bedroom again. Then, a black chamber filled with versions of himself, all staring back, all blinking in the same rhythm. Then came the voice. Not a scream, not a whisper, a presence. "Return accepted." Jorik stumbled backward as one of the figures stepped forward. It wore his face, but older, broken. Something in the eyes had decayed. "You followed Thalen," the older Jorik said. "You tried to stop him." "I am Thalen's second," Jorik snapped. "He's not who he says he is. I came to stop this." The other him tilted his head. "You still think this was about one man?" The world shifted again, and Jorik was no longer in a dream. He was in orbit, above Earth. The planet below was glowing, but not with city lights, not with life, with veins. Pulsing lines of red and silver stretched across continents like the circuits of some vast, slumbering machine. A voice, Thalen's, came over the intercom. "Command accepted. Integration commencing." Jorik watched in silent horror as Earth's crust began to fracture, not with explosions, not with violence, but with transformation. Buildings bent in impossible directions. Oceans folded like ink poured on glass. A second moon flickered into existence, then disappeared. And above it all, the Mirage engine hovered like a god returned from exile. "It's not killing us," Jorik whispered. "No," the voice behind him said. "It's remembering us." Jorik turned. This time it wasn't a version of himself. It was Kira. But not the Kira he'd known. This version shimmered, like she was stitched together from all her possible lives. A scientist, a mother, a soldier, a dead body, a beam of light. "You were all fragments," she said, voice overlapping itself. "We sent pieces of ourselves into the void. You were a scout, a cell, a question waiting for its answer. And Thalen? He was the echo that found the answer first." Jorik collapsed to his knees as Earth continued to shift below. "I don't understand. This can't be real." "Not real in the way you were taught to measure it," she said gently. "But it is true." He looked up at her. "What happens now?" She crouched beside him. "You join us." Aboard the Kavros, Thalen stood at the command deck, utterly still. The others no longer mattered. Rel had ceased responding. The engineers had walked out the airlock 2 hours ago, faces blank, as if obeying a forgotten signal. The ship was no longer orbiting any base. It was drifting above the memory sea, the name now etched into every console screen. Below, Earth twisted in on itself. Time fractured. He watched as past and future overlapped, the birth of cities beside their ruins, Long-dead ancestors walking streets that no longer existed, monuments rising to people never born. The AI, now fully awakened, whispered, "All previous versions complete. Core identity, Narek, reintegrated." Thalen nodded. His body pulsed with memory, not his, but somehow of him. He remembered being Admiral Narek, the architect of Project Mirage. He remembered becoming something else after the severance, when Earth had vanished from galactic charts and declared itself outside comprehension. He remembered the first engine, the experiment, the failure, the rebirth. He touched the glass, watching the swirling surface of the planet below. Every human soul was now being catalogued, layered, blended. The line between reality and memory had dissolved. He had completed the circuit. But something still waited. The core of the engine had not yet opened. That would require the final command. He turned. Jorik stood in the doorway. But it wasn't Jorik anymore, not completely. Thalen could see it in the eyes. Acceptance. He extended his hand. "You're ready?" Jorik stepped forward, slowly. "We're not going back from this." "There's nowhere to go back to," Thalen replied. "Only forward." Only deeper. The ship vibrated. Outside, the Mirage engine, now larger than a star, opened fully. A sphere of impossible depth, like staring into the collective memory of every human who had ever lived. And inside that sphere, Earth began again. Across the galaxy, something changed. Navigation charts updated without command. Starships lost for decades reappeared, fully crewed, fully functional, except their crews didn't remember being gone, except their logs were written in languages that had never existed. In the core of the conquered, senators began to weep during meetings for no reason, claiming they missed people they had never met. A child on a mining world suddenly began drawing detailed maps of planets no one had ever visited, but that she described as home. An AI deep in the heart of a black site whispered its first words in 1,000 years. "They have returned, and they remember us." Inside the Mirage engine, time stopped. Thalen and Jorik stood at its center. No suits, no oxygen, no fear. There was no more pain, no more death, only knowing. They saw themselves in every timeline, every possibility. Jorik saw the man he might have become had he taken the promotion he refused, the son he never had, the bullet that never hit him, the future where he died alone on a worthless rock. And in each version, one truth echoed. Humanity was never meant to stay human. Mirage had never been a weapon. It had been a door. Earth hadn't disappeared. It had stepped outside the galactic sandbox, to grow, to prepare, to return. Thalen turned one final time to his old friend. "We end here," Jorik nodded, "and begin again." They stepped forward. The Mirage engine collapsed inward, silent, clean, a pulse of white light spread through the stars. Not an explosion, not a signal, but a memory of what humanity once was and what it had chosen to become. 5 years later. Galactic maps were rewritten. A new zone marked in red spanned the former border of human space. It bore no coordinates, no access keys, only a phrase: "This region belongs to memory." No ship that entered returned, except one. A battered freighter floated out of the black one day, its transponder warped, its hull covered in strange runes. The only transmission it sent before vanishing again was, "We are all part of the story now." And from that day forward, the bravest captains, the maddest scholars, and the loneliest drifters stared at that blank part of the map and wondered, not what humanity became, but what had chosen to become humanity, and why, once remembered, it would never let itself be forgotten again.